Hello friends, in this video we are going to discuss about ecology in wildlife conservation and its management. Describe ecology in wildlife conservation and management. Wildlife conservation. Ecology is the study of Earth's systems and is an integral part in wildlife conservation. We cannot begin to protect an animal without knowing what is happening around it. Wildlife conservation includes all human activities and efforts directed towards saving wildlife from extinction. This includes both conservation and scientific management of wild species. Wildlife and nature at large are being linked to human beings for many emotional and social reasons. Wildlife plays an essential role in ecological and biological processes, which are again important for life. The normal functioning of the biosphere depends on endless interactions between animal, plants, and microorganisms. Wildlife has occupied a special space of worship and protection in various cultures of the world. Conservation of wildlife doesn't mean a blanket protection for all faunal and flower species, rather it implies a reasonable, judicious control over the multiplication of plants and animals which interact together to provide a proper environment to man whose existence is in danger today. Due to the irrational use of Earth's natural and biological resources in the past, most of the wildlife has been destroyed beyond recovery. It is our immediate duty to protect the natural splendor of the ecosystem and to develop a system of coexistence with every living being on earth. Although most of the countries of the world are very specific about the conservation of wildlife, but the number of wildlife is decreasing day by day. The World Wildlife Fund is an international agency doing commendable work in promoting the conservation of wildlife. National agencies are also engaged in the conservation of wildlife. Some ecological steps towards wildlife conservation can be as follows. To survey and collect all the information about the wildlife, especially their numbers and growth, protecting the habitat by protecting the forest, delimitation of the areas of their natural habitat, to protect wildlife from pollution and natural hazards, to impose a complete ban on hunting and capture of wildlife, to ban the export and import of wildlife products, and to give severe punishment to those who indulge in this activity. To develop game sanctuaries for specific wild animals or for general wildlife, to make special arrangements for the protection of those species whose number are very limited, to develop general awareness at national and international level regarding conservation of wildlife. Then last one is to adopt a system of wildlife management through trained personnel. India is a good example where many steps have been taken for wildlife conservation. It is a land of diverse wildlife with more than 500 types of wild animals, 2,100 types of birds, and about 20,000 types of reptiles and fish. According to estimate, about 200 species of wild animals and birds have already become extinct in India, and another 2,500 are on the verge of extinction. Some of them are black buck, chinkara, wolf, swamp deer, nilgai, Indian gazelle, antelope, tiger, rhinoceros, Gir lion, crocodile, flamingo, pelican, bustard, white crane, grey heron, mountain quail, etc. Government and NGOs are taking keen interest in the conservation of wildlife. The Wildlife Protection Act in 1972, amended in 2002, contains several provisions for the protection of wildlife. India has a total of 771 protected areas, which includes 104 national parks, 544 wildlife sanctuaries, 46 community reserves and 77 conservation reserves, covering a total area of 162099.47 km per square. Country coverage 4.93%. These protected areas have been established across the country to secure the future of endangered species. Apart from this, a wildlife conservation week is also celebrated every year, 7 October, but there is still a long way to go in this direction. For the effective conservation of wildlife, there are three basic needs such as sufficient food and water, a place to live, and a place to breed in safety. To achieve these, the following measures are in practice. Reserved forest, national parks, sanctuaries are not exploited. Where full exploitation is not possible, deforestation is carried out in limited blocks at one time. Growing of a single plant variety is discouraged as far as possible. Instead, mixed vegetation is encouraged. The natural openings of the forest, watercourses and river banks are protected from predators. To control the pasture, to increase the forage, and to preserve the organic matter in the soil, it is done in blocks with no burnt area in between. Provision is made for the dust bath and artificial salt licking in the forest to maintain the general health of the animals. The grazing of domestic animals is dangerous for wild animals, as the latter can never compete successfully with domestic animals. In addition, domestic stock may be responsible for spreading many infectious diseases. Therefore, grazing by domestic stock is avoided as far as possible. Farming is also avoided near sanctuaries, parks to prevent ecological hazards caused by pesticides. Scientific studies by qualified personnel, especially on threatened species of wild animals, are encouraged to assess and improve their condition even by breeding them in captivity and rehabilitating them in suitable habitats. Many such measures have been taken and much more needs to be done to check the decline of wildlife and to create the condition in which it can flourish with its diversity natural settings. But nothing can be fruitful without educational and promotional programs for change in human attitude, especially among school children who are the builders of our future society. Methods used for conservation of wildlife. The methods of conservation of faunal and flower species are broadly classified into two methods, namely in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. In situ conservation is the most appropriate method. This approach involves the protection of the total ecosystem through a network of protected areas, national parks, sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, many wetlands, mangroves, coral reefs, etc. Sacred groves and lakes include common natural habitats, protected areas established for in situ conservation of wildlife. Ex situ conservation involves the cultivation of rare, rearing of plant and threatened animal species in biology and botanical gardens, and conservation of plant species in the form of seeds in seed banks, etc., through tissue culture techniques. Individuals of the species are maintained in artificial conditions under human supervision. Among these methods are maintaining gene banks, pollen preservation, and most useful, cryopreservation, in which tissue culture and germplasm are preserved. The three specific objectives of wildlife conservation are maintaining essential ecological processes and life supporting systems, air, water, soil, then to preserve the diversity of species or the extent of genetic material of the world's organisms, to ensure the sustainable use of species, in fact, ecosystems that support rural communities and urban industries. Thus, the broad objective of conservation of wildlife is not only related to biotic plants, animals, and microorganisms, but also to abiotic factors. Therefore, conservation of biodiversity is a complex operation that deals specifically with the plants, animals, microorganisms, and these non living elements of the environment on which they depend. Application of ecology in wildlife conservation. Wildlife, a term that refers to animals that are not usually domesticated. They are living resources that will die and be replaced by other of their type. Wildlife plays an important role in balancing the environment and provides stability to various natural processes of nature. It can be found in all ecosystems, deserts, rainforests, plains, and other areas. Wildlife is important for its beauty, economics, scientific, and survival value. It helps in maintaining the ecological balance of nature and maintains the food chain. It provides useful substances and wild animals products like ivory, leather, honey, teeth, etc. Apart from being the cultural asset of the country, it also imparts aesthetic value to human beings. We depend to a large extent on wildlife for every primary requirement of our life. For example, the clothes we wear and the medicines we eat.